As yesterday, the President of the United States incited an armed insurrection against America. The gleeful desecration of the U.S. Capitol, which is the temple of our American democracy, and the violence targeting Congress are horrors that will forever stain our nation's history, instigated by the President of the United States. That's why it's such a stain. In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people. I join the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this President by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and the Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment. That is the overwhelming sentiment of my caucus. And the American people, by the way. Justice will be done to those who carried out these acts, which were acts of sedition and acts of cowardice. To those whose purpose was to deter our responsibility, you have failed. A complete tool of Putin, this president is. Putin's goal was to diminish the role of the view of democracy in the world. That's what he has been about. And again, his enabler has been Donald Trump for a long time. That's why I said in that photo when I'm leaving his meeting with you, Mr. President, all roads lead to Putin. Putin wants to undermine democracy. That's what he's about domestically and internationally. And the president gave him the biggest of all of his many gifts to Putin, the biggest gift yesterday. My friends, we are in a very difficult place in our country as long as Donald Trump still sits in the White House. By inciting sedition, as he did yesterday, he must be removed from office. While it's only 13 days left, any day can be a horror show for America.
And just like that, the official position of Democratic leadership is that either Trump's cabinet move to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove him from office, or that Congress will officially start impeachment proceedings to remove him that way. But either way you cut it, they want Trump out of office now. Now, the first question I'd expect to pop up would be, well, what's the point of doing this with less than 2 weeks left in his term? But to that, I'd say, look how much damage could be done in one day. And knowing that that damage occurred at Trump's own hands, knowing that it was him who's invited all of the violence we're seeing now, there's absolutely no reason to assume that it would stop if left to his own devices. If a child got his hands on a knife and cut himself, what's the first thing you would do? Would you let him hold on to the knife for another 2 weeks? You would remove it immediately. And the same concept applies, because knowing what he's capable of, who's to blame if we do nothing if he calls up another mob on Saturday or Tuesday or Thursday? Why chance it, knowing full well what he's capable of? Consider too that even when he had the opportunity to condemn the violence during the insurrection at the Capitol, Trump opted instead to release a video complaining about the election being stolen from him, which was the catalyst for the insurrection in the first place. He saw the violence, and instead of condemning it, he defended it. He justified it. It was a move so vile and incomprehensible that it got his Twitter account, Facebook account, Instagram account, and Twitch account all suspended. So if you're wondering whether he regretted the violence or reveled in it, he already answered that question for us. And I just want to say, for those who think that pushing for the removal of this president at this point is a fool's errand, on one hand, it might be. The Republican Party's already proven to us on a daily basis that there's little to nothing that Donald Trump could ever do that would lead them to grow a spine. But on the other hand, this isn't about scoring any political points for the Democrats, and Republicans can clearly see that. The November election is over. The Georgia runoff is over. Trump already lost. Democrats are taking full control of government. There's nothing left to gain. This is only about keeping people safe. And by the way, that's a sentiment shared by a number of Republicans too. In fact, more Republicans already acknowledge that Trump is unilaterally responsible for this than acknowledge that Trump was responsible for extorting Ukraine during the impeachment investigation. Of course, you have Mitt Romney, who said that the violence was the result of, quote, a selfish man's injured pride and the outrage of his supporters, whom he has deliberately misinformed for the past 2 months and stirred to action this very morning. What happened here today was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States. But then you also have Ben Sasse, who said that the Capitol, quote, was ransacked while the leader of the free world cowered behind his keyboard, tweeting against his vice president for fulfilling the duties of his oath to the Constitution. Lies have consequences. This violence was the inevitable and ugly outcome of the president's addiction to constantly stoking division. Republican lawmaker Adam Kinzinger even called for Trump's impeachment outright.
Yesterday was a sad day, as we all know. It was the day where fire stoked by the president and other leaders finally leapt out of the pit, and it lit the trees. Thankfully, the strength of our Constitution and democracy held, and we emerged today a little battered, but resolved. What happened yesterday is a wake-up call to many, but it's a call to accountability for others. In the past few presidencies, the administrations have been so concerned about even a moment of weakness that the 25th Amendment was invoked during minor surgeries, passing the duties to the vice president while the president was under anesthesia, because even for that moment to have the captain of the ship absent could cause a major catastrophe. Sadly, yesterday, it became evident that not only has the president abdicated his duty to protect the American people and the people's house, he invoked and inflamed passions that only gave fuel to the insurrection that we saw here. When pressed to move and denounce the violence, he barely did so, while of course victimizing himself and seeming to give a wink and a nod to those doing it. All indications are that the president has become unmoored, not just from his duty, nor even his oath, but from reality itself. It is for this reason that I call for the vice president and members of the cabinet to ensure the next few weeks are safe for the American people, and that we have a sane captain of the ship. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment allows a majority of the cabinet and the vice president to assume the duties of the office of presidency until the president is able to himself. It's time to invoke the 25th Amendment and to end this nightmare. We will arise from this, but we cannot forget what led us here. The liars and conspiracy authors are already at it again this morning with false narratives about yesterday's disaster. Here's the truth. The president caused this. The president is unfit, and the president is unwell. And the president must now relinquish control of the executive branch voluntarily or involuntarily.
All of that is to say that this isn't some resistance platitude, it's not a bumper sticker, it's not political posturing, it is a bipartisan effort intended to keep people safe from a man who has proven that the violence is the point. And every day that action isn't taken is another day that the American people are willfully put at risk. It's another day where Trump's henchmen stand by ready to cause damage and mayhem and chaos. And until and unless we do anything, we can't be surprised when it happens again. While you're here, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Bryan Tyler Cohen. I take a deep dive into the top stories of the week, and I also interview major players in the world of politics, like Kamala Harris, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, Katie Porter, Al Franken, Cory Booker, Jamie Harrison, Mary Trump, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Bryan Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.